I thought I knew my husband better than anyone. 8 years together, nearly 7 of them married. Jake has always been my rock. But lately, when the clock strikes 2:32 a.m., something else wears his face. Something cold. Something unblinking. And last night, it finally spoke to me. I want to start off with explaining my husband, Jake, is an amazing man. We have been together for 8 wonderful years and married nearly 7 of those years. We have struggles, like any couple, but we've done well as a team to overcome anything life has thrown at us. Until now. Until this insane situation. Let me back up a bit. About 2 weeks ago, Jake and I came home after going out for dinner. We were both pretty worn out from the day's events and were eager to hop in bed. We went through our regular nightly routine. Showering, comfy clothes, teeth brushing, you get it. We hopped in bed, gave each other a good night kiss, cut the main light off in our bedroom and snuggled in the bed to sleep. I turned on my side and looked at the new nightlight Jake had recently bought for me, as I cannot sleep in a totally dark room, and drifted off to sleep. I awoke with a start and was confused. After blinking a few times and letting myself become more focused, I glanced at the alarm clock on my nightstand to see 2:32 a.m. in bold red. I turned over to face towards Jake and immediately froze. Jake was laying flat on his back, arms laying perfectly still by his sides, but his head was turned towards me. He had blank expression, but his eyes were wide open, staring directly into my soul. I literally stopped breathing. I just stared back into his wide, unblinking eyes for several seconds before reality sank back into my brain and I realized something had to be horribly wrong. I immediately looked at his chest and could see he was breathing. "Jake, honey, are you okay?" I said as I reached to touch him. His body felt ice cold and this sent me further spiraling. I sat straight up in the bed and quickly moved to hover over him. His head slightly turned while his eyes followed me, still wide and unblinking. I grabbed both of his cold shoulders and started to shake him. "Jake, please, wake up, wake up." No response. Just his eyes boring into my soul. Tears ran down my face as I turned to reach for my phone. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and started dial 911 with shaky fingers. Before I could hit send, I heard the sound of snoring. I turned to look back at my husband. I felt myself freeze again for a different reason. Jake's eyes were now closed. His face was more relaxed and his lips were slightly parted, resting peacefully. I dropped my phone on the bed and climbed over to touch him again, and he felt warm. I sat in disbelief for several minutes, just staring at him as he slept soundly. Eventually, I put my phone back on the nightstand and laid back down. I turned on my side away from him and pulled the covers over my head. Somehow, I drifted off to sleep despite still feeling terrified. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of bacon frying and Jake's side of the bed empty. The previous night's events seemed more like a vivid nightmare at this point. I slid out of bed and headed into the kitchen. Jake smiled when he saw me. "Good morning, beautiful," he said sweetly while plating a few strips of bacon beside a pile of scrambled eggs. "Morning." I greeted him back as he brought my breakfast and a cup of coffee over to me. "Sleep well?" he asked as he moved to grab his own plate before sitting beside at me the bar. Not really," I quietly admitted. Jake looked at me puzzled. "What's wrong? Why didn't you sleep good?" "You recall looking, well, glaring at me last night." Jake looked even more confused. "No. Why would I do that?" "I don't know, but it was so creepy. You even felt ice cold. You wouldn't wake up and I almost called an ambulance." Jake dropped his fork and got up from his seat. He wrapped his arms around me and hugged me tight. "I'm sorry, sweetie, that sounds awful. It was probably some weird night terror. I doubt it happens again though. You still love me." I hugged him back as I snuggled into him, always. The next few days went by without incident. The weird staring experience had faded from my brain. I woke with a start. Why? I didn't know. My eyes darted around the room before setting on the alarm clock. 2:32 a.m. I slowly turned to look at Jake and let out a yelp. He was sitting straight up in bed, but his head was turned towards me, blank expression with eyes wide open. So wide that it didn't seem humanly possible. I slowly crawled towards him while whispering his name. No reaction. I gently reached out to touch his shoulder. Ice cold again. I stared into his big, unblinking eyes. I don't know what came over me, but before I realized what I was doing, I slapped him across the face using every bit of strength I could muster. It was like slapping a solid rock, cold and unmoving. He didn't respond at all. I was frozen as I watched him slowly lay down, eyes never blinking or breaking from mine. I turned away to reach for my phone again, only to hear the sound of him snoring. I jerked my head to see him, once again, sound asleep. Eyes closed, face relaxed. I snatched my phone off the nightstand and headed out of the room to the couch in our den. I switched on the light and grabbed the blanket off the couch. I snuggled under the blanket as I laid on the semi-comfortable cushions. I searched up night terrors, trying my best to convince myself that was all it was. No matter what I read, I could not bring myself to go back into the bedroom with him. I woke with a start again. This time sunlight filled the room. My eyes finally settled on the concerned-looking face of Jake. "What are you doing out here?" "You did it again. This time you were sitting up. You barely looked human. You're scaring me, Jake." I blurted out as my eyes filled with tears. Jake's face softened as he reached for me, pulling me into a warm embrace. I was almost scared to touch him. He apologized again, said he needed to hurry into work but promised he'd call the doctor. We agreed a sleep study may help. I calmed down and walked out on the porch to see him off. The best the doctor could do was an appointment in the next week. I dreaded nightfall and almost didn't sleep in bed with him, but he begged me to try again. A couple more nights passed without incident. I started to relax once more. Then tonight happened. I woke up with blurry vision at first, very confused at what I was seeing. After blinking a couple of times, I felt a scream leave my throat. Jake was not laying down beside me or even sitting up. He was standing beside my side of the bed, leaned over me, just inches from my face. His eyes wide, unblinking, and bulging, the absolute worst that I seen. His expression was blank, but he didn't look like him anymore. His skin was nearly grey and aged, mouth stretched too long in a firm line, cheeks sunken in and those horrific eyes burning into my soul. My mind went blank. I was paralyzed with fear. Then his stretched lips twitched in the strangest way. Then came the voice. "I see you." It wasn't Jake's voice. It was too deep, too rough, and too aged. Finally, my adrenaline kicked in. I slid over and rolled away from him and off his side of the bed. I ran out of the room as fast as I could, still feeling those awful, large, and bulging eyes on me. I grabbed my car keys and ran out of the house. The car could not start fast enough. As it roared to life, I gunned it out of the driveway and down the road. Tears ran down my face as I sped away from the house and those haunting eyes. The memories washed over me. I screamed and cried as all the visions I had worked so hard to block from my mind came flooding back. I had heard that voice before. That night, Jake begged me to stay home, but a few friends were going bar hopping and I refused to stay behind. I had an alcohol problem and it was becoming more and more of an issue. I promised Jake I'd only have a beer or two, kissed him goodbye and was on my way. Next thing I know, it's after 2 a.m. and I was behind the wheel of my car, drunk. I was taking the curves too fast. The radio was off, but I was singing at the top of my lungs when a figure in the road appeared. My brain was not registering or reacting quick enough. By the time I hit the brake, it was too late. I hit the figure. Hard. The car skidded to a halt and the figure was laid in the center of the road, several feet away from the vehicle. I stared at my radio screen before jumping out of the car. 2:32 a.m. I ran to see what it was. I felt suddenly sober as I pleaded for it to be a deer. It wasn't. It was an elderly man, eyes wide open and bulging, looking up at me. It was not good. He was badly injured. Gore covered the scene. I heard his voice, deep and rough. "Help. I see you." I panicked. If I called this in, I'd lose everything being Jake and what we had built. I'd go to jail possibly for life. I looked around at my surroundings. Mostly woods, a few houses farther down the road, completely darken. No lights, no people, no witnesses. Surely, another vehicle would come along and help. There was no guarantees he'd make it regardless. I looked back down at my victim. "I'm sorry," I whimpered. I ran back to my car and put it in drive. I swerved around him and bounded down the road. I pulled in the driveway and ran into the house. Jake was sound asleep. I stood under the hot water in the shower, reassuring myself no one saw and someone else would help. I was half right. It was on the news the next day, and while no one saw, it was a couple of hours before someone else came along. It was too late then. The elderly gentleman had dementia and wandered out of his house while his granddaughter slept. Wandered into the road and met his horrible fate at my hands due to my foolish decisions. Somehow, I convinced myself he never would have made it. No point in me ruining my life. I blocked the horrible event from my brain and swore off alcohol. Life went on and things were normal. Better than normal even. I did not realize the first night I encountered my husband staring at me was the 1-year anniversary of the accident. It all makes sense now. Whether the ghost of the old man really possessed Jake or if this a byproduct of a guilty subconscious makes no difference. He is haunting me. I'm writing this confession from my hotel room. I left my laptop in the car the day before. Lucky me, huh? To Jake, I am so sorry I hurt you. To the elderly gentleman, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I planned to turn myself in. I feared jail, but now I fear the haunting more. May this break this curse. Never drink and drive.